Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going weekly video games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. Kind of back with another episode, so a couple things to talk about. So I am retiring the concept of what was called for a short while gaming outside the algorithm. The reasons for that mainly are I'm not a full-time journalist, obviously. I have a 9-to-5, which I really enjoy. It's kind of the mission of my life. I would never, leave that for content creation. That's never been my intent. So, but the games media outside of earnings weeks or Matt Piscatella posting an MPD chart really doesn't report much these days other than gossips, leaks, and rumors. And I am kind of dependent upon some type of news feed to support that. So I am maybe unfortunately back inside the algorithm, periodically spending time on Twitter, talking to my mutuals. So some of the topics that we're going to get into are not strictly news and objective based, but it'll still lean towards technical, financial, and legal. So I don't know what the name of this series is going to be called. That kind of remains to be seen. The working title tonight is just that. It's just a label that I put on this segment. So without much further ado, let's get to it. The first thing I want to talk about is Project Helix, and I've been talking about Project Helix a lot. I think, unfortunately, all of us have been talking about Project Helix a lot for not really good reasons, because there really isn't a lot of information about Project Helix. That GDC presentation was all of 30 minutes. It should kind of be patently obvious to any outside observers that a 30-minute presentation isn't really where you're going to put out really meaty, sufficient content for game developers to really answer a lot of their questions. But the main thing I want to talk about tonight is different thoughts that I've had about Project Helix in contrast to some of the things that I've talked about. And so for a very, 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 very long time, I've talked and written loads about kind of my perception of what this device was going to be. And admittedly, that was heavily driven by things other people had heard, things people had communicated to me. I think, quite honestly, a lot of what all of us have been talking about is about feeding off of the input that we got from Sarah Bond, which was that, hey, if you want to see the template of kind of where we're going next, then take a look at the Asus ROG Xbox Ally, and that is kind of what this device is going to look like. And so going off of that cue, like I said, I've talked and written lots about this being a PC-forward device and primarily being a Windows 11 device in terms of functionality, as far as being consumer-facing, and having a console in it primarily as a subsystem, as a subordinate set of functions within a higher parent-level system that is a Windows 11 gaming PC, and that you would, the PC is running all the time, and that you would launch this Xbox console environment in whatever you want to call it. I think that's been part of the problem with the dialogue. You say one, you say, so whether it's a container or a VM or a hypervisor or a nanovisor, or whether it's on a completely separate hard drive and it's physically separated or they're logically separated, some people get very, very, into their actually discussions. And I had one person on Twitter accuse me of, getting into technobabble and talking about things that consumers don't care about. Actually, the level of granularity that I talk about the tech is actually at the level where it impacts the types of experiences that a consumer will receive and be exposed to. Whereas the lower level esoteric details are the things that consumers aren't going to care about. A consumer doesn't care about which hard drive it's on and whether or not it's on a separate hard drive or it's just a partition. A consumer doesn't care about whether or not it's running in a container or on a hypervisor or a nanovisor or a VM or how the image is mounted. But they do care about the types of experiences they get, and that will get into the code that's being delivered for the game, how that code is modified to either run as a PC game or an Xbox game, etc. So there are some pertinent technical details that I think are important. But to get back to the main point, I have been talking, like I said, mainly about this device being a PC-first device. It occurred to me last week that there's a possibility that we've all gotten it wrong. And I won't say gotten it wrong from the notion of whether or not you are team blue or team green, or team, I haven't figured out what color the PC master race is. We'll have to pick a color for them, but the point is, queuing off of those things that Sarah Bond mentioned. Yeah, so thanks a lot, Rachie, for checking into the chat. Like I said, I think a lot of us have queued off the thing that Sarah Bond mentioned, but I considered last week that there's a possibility that 50-50 chance that this is actually a console, and again, not in the way that a lot of people running with the narratives that, this is a console, this is an Xbox, the whole thing that came around during the Xbox ROG or the ROG Xbox Ally time period, but more so, again, as I originally articulated, in terms of the functionality. And so when I say it's a console, what I mean is the parent level system, the master system, being a console, and then you launching a Windows 11 sandboxed PC experience environment inside of that. And then maybe even then within that environment, that then not having all of the features, functions, and capabilities that you would normally have access to on the general purpose multifunction personal computer. And so a PC that is locked down to the point where the only thing you can do inside of that PC is play a video game. And those things don't necessarily make things better, but it does definitely cause an inflection in how we're thinking about it. I talked to Brap about this last week, and interestingly enough, the episode of Rebel FM that posted this weekend, and I don't know which host it is, and I don't recognize the voices, but it's Matt Chandronnet, Arthur Geese, and I forget the third panel member, but these guys have been around the industry. They all, I think, a lot of, either all of them or 2 out of the 3 of them worked at IGN at one point. They've been covering video games for the last 30 years or so, I believe. The podcast started in the early 2000s, so they're a recurring show that I generally listen to, and the panel member articulated things very much so in the same way that I did. That in terms of this alternate theory, that people are thinking about this as a PC that runs console games, and when I was talking about it, it was mainly to address backwards compatibility. But again, he and I have both kind of put this additional framework of an additional theory, which is that it's a console first that plays PC games. And so you launch the PC sandbox environment as a subsystem or as a subordinate function of a larger console. Again, and so, in terms that, to put it in ways that I sometimes put at work, we've been talking about this thing as big PC, little console, but there's also the possibility that this thing is big console, little PC, right? And that the PC is, a secondary function. I think part of the problem that's been going on in this dialogue has been, let me check on the chat real quick. So Rachie says, Xbox is dead video. Last time I saw it, it gets the clicks. Give the PC color purple, the color of emperors. Hero Down Under, thanks a lot, Real Nate. Thanks a lot for checking into the chat. Hero Down Under, I put the notification in the Discord, and so hopefully if you subscribe to the channel, you should get a YouTube notification, although YouTube notifications frequently flake. Yeah, and Rachie is talking about the stores being apps within themselves, and so that's a possibility. Who knows? Absolutely, whether or not the launching of the PC subsystem is essentially an app or appears as an app icon or a tile button, whatever you want to call it. And then once you're in that environment, then you can launch those other apps. Rebel FM articulated it as those apps being the actual icons that are available for you on the home screen, and then launching one of them kind of auto launches this PC sandbox subsystem within it. So all those things are definitely possibilities. I think part of the problem with this conversation has been this notion of product categories, and there's a very strong contingent of very vocal, outspoken people who insist that this notion of product categorization doesn't matter. And I think a lot of that is being deliberately ignorant and willfully obtuse. when you go into Best Buy, things are separated by product categories so that you can find them, and they are aligned in those product categories in areas of the store as well as online, with traditional connotations that we have around those product categories. And the Windows laptops are in a particular area, the Macs are in another area, the gaming piece, the all-in-one desktop PCs are in an area, and the gaming PCs are in an area. They're not all commingled. And so a lot of people try to do this thing where they say, the consoles are basically a PC, x86 architecture, similar components, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, we're not in an academic classroom. We are not taking, Comp Sci 101, freshman year in college. We are not trying to take the quiz or the test to answer the question about the formal definition of a computer. If you twist the definition enough, you can technically define an abacus as a computer. You can definitely define a calculator as a computer. You can define an ATM as a computer. And quite obviously, when grandma calls you and says, hey, I need a thing to do email and surf the web, you don't tell her to go down to the bank and pull into the ATM drive-through lane and do her web browsing and answer her email there. So let's kind of stop with kind of the playing games and like playing word games and being disingenuous, right? And talk about things as if product categorization doesn't matter. For time immemorial in the tech space, product categorization has been very important. I've spoken many times about, look at the way Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone. And he knew that he was trying to redefine a product categorization and a thing that people normally thought about when they thought about a different set of devices. And he gets on the stage and he says many times, it's a phone, an iPod, and an internet communication device. He says that a few times, and then his entire voice track is oriented around that notion of convergence. So, when we talk about this thing potentially being a console, a front-facing console versus a front-facing PC, that does change my evaluation and how I think this device will do on the market, and particularly how I think it will do in terms of sell-through. And guys in the chat, if I'm not loud enough, mic-wise, let me know. Or if the music is too loud and the audio mix balance isn't great, please let me know. Yeah, so my Mac Mini isn't providing me the easiest line of sight to the chat. Actually, I think I said I was going to pop it out, and I did not do that. Remember when the PS3 was weird, devs hated it, and Sony had to bend the knee and become a normal x86 box with the PS4. We know a certain set of people don't want it to matter, right? So again, changes to how I view this thing from a competitive perspective, if that is the case and it is console front facing and you launch the PC environment once you're on the console home screen. I think that makes a huge difference. And again, this will be a great FAFO moment, because you will get an opportunity to readily see how product categorization matters and how it will matter to consumers. Because when this was a PC, if this is a PC, what you're then talking about is hey, this is a PC. It can also play your console games. If you wanted to get an entry-level PC, you'd be looking at $1,500, $2,000. And no, I'm not paying attention to Potato PC Nation, who insists that you can build a competent PC for $750 or $800. You could look around this room in the background. I have 5 gaming PCs in here. They run the gamut from an RTX 3080 Ti up to an RTX 5080. I have one 5000 series card, three 4000 series cards in the 3080 Ti. Not playing, again, stupid word games, right? Yes, you can build a hoopty and make it barely survivable and play at 1080p at medium settings if you want to build a box for $780. And then you can do other types of shenanigans like overclock and do these things to make it perform better, but that's not what the normal average consumer and a person first going to PC is going to do. So again, let's stop with that foolishness as well. So again, if this thing were a PC first, console second, you would be talking to people about offering them the value prop that this is a less expensive way to get into the PC gaming regime. When you start talking about this thing as a console that also plays PC games, Now your competitive stance is, this is a comparative product to the PlayStation 6, but we're going to charge you more for it. And the value prop for that is you get access to the Steam store and Epic Game Store. A console person making that approach doesn't know much about the Steam store and the Epic Game Store. They probably know about their existence, but they don't have firsthand experience using them and awareness of the type of content. Some of them will, because maybe they play console as their main, but they have a Steam Deck. So that creates a different thing. I wrote a thing a week ago, I think, where I talk about the fact that the gaming market is becoming a niche of niches, and that you aren't going to have these like large aggregate swaths of the addressable market that you can easily define. Christopher Dring mentioned this on the Game Business Show when he was talking to Ben Porter, the senior consultant at Newzoo, when they talked about the recent data that they put out for GDC as well. You know, and Christopher Dring's kind of encapsulation of it was, you know, well, way back in the day, you know, the addressable market for gaming was just small children and then teenagers, right, who had consoles in their bedroom. But the market is obviously much more complex now, and it's grown in complexity. And even throughout most of the 2000s, I would say the pockets of the addressable market have been relatively well defined, and a thing that we could grasp. But now the market is even more fragmented, and you have the Roblox people and the Minecraft people, and that's a UGC part. And even though people rage about how these UGC games are the future and all the growth is on Roblox, you should look at the fact that there's only 2 of them, right? And that nobody else has been able to break into that space. And that might indicate to you that, yes, maybe there's a lot of growth there, but the market also doesn't have tolerance for a ton of variance in that space. And they've picked their 2 UGC games, and that's what they're going to stick with. You know, you look at PlayStation and you look at Knights, and the fact that that was a UGC game, and the fact that, you know, the end result of that was for Sony to pull Media Molecule off of it. So again, back to the competitive stance. Now you're talking about, this is a console, and we're going to charge you a couple $100 more of it so that you can get access to PC games, which a lot of console consumers aren't going to necessarily care about. So it remains to be seen and proven that that value prop is going to make any difference to them. The other historical anecdote, and I talked about this a little bit on last night's episode of Enough to Keep Going, so I apologize for guys in the chat. I know a lot of you were there. You know, when in any console generation have we had it that the more expensive console has won the console generation? To my memory, never. There may be something like way back in the 80s where, I don't know, maybe the NES was more expensive than the Sega Master System. I don't know, some, you know, momentary slice in history that even I've forgotten. But in general, the more expensive console has been the one that has slipped the most footing. This is what happened with the PlayStation 3 when it launched more expensively than the Xbox 360. This is what happened to the Xbox One when it came out $100 more than the PlayStation 4. You know, it's a slight exception to that rule if you want to think about it, is, you know, when PlayStation launches its Pro consoles, and we had the one generation with the Xbox One X or the Scorpio. Those were more expensive consoles, obviously, but I think that's a slightly different optic and a slightly different set of decision-making that consumers go through when they were looking at those mid-generation upgrades. So I don't know how great it is for the voice track for Project Helix, if this is the case, to be the most expensive console in the world. It may concurrently carry the Power Fantasy, you know, voice track, but there was the Power Fantasy voice track this generation, and that hasn't really panned out in terms of greater market share. So again, I think the value prop will be a problem. I think the value prop is also a problem if you're coming at it from the PC side. And there was a moment in time where I saw that this thing might be a compelling device because I was thinking about it as a PC, but in my mind, I was also thinking, great, I'll be able to install Audacity on it and OBS and other applications, or, you know, and I'll, you know, maybe you'll be able to go to the SteelSeries website and pull down SteelSeries engine and use whatever headset rate you want to. But the notion that this is going to be kind of a locked box PC makes it much less appealing to me personally, as a PC main, as an alternative PC. For that, I will probably look more so at the Steam machine. It being a console first device means that it slips out of that categorization, that competitive categorization that I've been talking about, where Project Helix goes up against the Steam machine, And it goes right back to putting Project Helix up against the PlayStation 6 as a significantly more expensive device with added functionality that many consumers in that addressable market may not care about, and with a limited set of capabilities in terms of the flexibility of PC. Because as much as what I always say about PC mains is that we may go to PC initially on the promise of power, on the promise of increased frames, of improved image quality. But in my opinion, the reason you stay a PC main, the reason I've stayed a PC main, is because of the flexibility. Because the box can do everything, and the box gives you the maximum amount of control. So the notion of me paying $1,000 for a device that includes a subordinate function of a PC environment that provides me less flexibility than my self-built PCs, that just immediately catapults me to the point where I say, why would I bother? I'll just spend the additional money, buy a big boy PC, not baby's first PC. And this is even, again, where we're talking about the PC part of this being a subordinate functionality. We're not even at baby's PC. Now we're not at the place where I was comparing this thing before, when I talked about comparing it to the TI-99, the VIC-20, the Commodore 64, Atari Amiga, Coleco Atom, right? We're actually at a step down from what those devices were in my mind, in terms of, when they were on the market in the late 80s, early 90s. So, it's going to be an interesting thing to see how this goes. So let me check the chat. We decide who and what. Hero Down Under says we decide who and what succeeds. Rachel says, hey, don't attack my Polaris and Pascal appearance. Potato Nation, rise up, wake up. This is OGTX 1050 and RX 580s. Hey, Retro, thanks a lot for joining the chat and swinging by the show. Let me see if this is the last little bit that I want to cover. Yeah, so the last little bit I want to cover on Project Helix is I've kind of seen some clips of some other podcasts, and there were some conversations about tech going on. I want to kind of re-level set and re-baseline what the reality is of the tech that's going to be included in this box. Generally, when consoles launch, since they flipped to x86 architecture, it needs to be understood that the R&D behind them is longer lead than, let's say, concurrent GPUs that even come out at the same time. So in the case of this generation, there was the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation and the PlayStation 5, and those things came out with their AMD components. But at the same time that they launched, NVIDIA launched the RTX 3000 series, which was a generation ahead in technology than those boxes launched with. And I know there are all the people with the power fantasies that, like, the current generation consoles have RTX 3000 equivalent power. I'll just say my interpretation is that their technology is not the same. They are a generation behind. And even if you feel that they are the same, that's fine. You can believe that. My point would again be, keep in mind that they launched, the RTX 3000 series launched, and in the time that those consoles have been on the market, the 5 years, we have also launched the RTX 4000 series and the RTX 5000 series. And by the time this thing launches, we will be launching the RTX 6000 series. So these boxes come out and they get leapfrogged in PC technology 3 and 4 times. It seemed to be there was a conversation going on today that there will be technology offered in Magnus, right on the die, that is better or greater than what you will be able to buy on the DIY market at the time. And I will say, no, that won't be the case. Even if it is the case for a moment in time, for a brief crack in the window, for a month or 2 months, again, you're going to buy a locked box and you're going to be on that box for 7 years, and that technology will move. And in the meantime, the DIY PC market will move. And yes, you can have all the discussions of cost that you want, but again, as I continuously advise people, once a consumer has made the decision to move to PC and they are a high-end PC gamer, I get it, we're only 14% of the market. But once that person is in that category, the topic of cost goes out the window. Not meaning that those people are completely ambivalent to how much they spend, but their budgetary constraints are governed by the DIY PC market. They're not governed by consoles. So once a person goes into that market, they're not thinking about, oh, I could build something that provides more optimized games for $750. It'll be a console. We're not interested in a console. A console doesn't run OBS. It doesn't run Audacity. It doesn't run Creative Cloud. It doesn't do all of the other things that people use their PCs for. Now, I get it. Live streamers have created this initiative where we have a lot of people in the market, more than ever before, who strictly buy PCs for no other reason than gaming. I will reserve my personal judgment about that. It's like, okay, but then I would still say the decision-making, the rubric that those people use is different, because the only thing they care about is how much money they're paying for a thing to just play games on. I am personally not spending $1,500, $2,000, $2,500, $3,000, whatever. I'm not spending that money on a thing that I only play games on. I use my PCs for tons of additional stuff, and that's why I don't mind the cost, and that's why the comparison to how much a console costs goes out the window. And again, I'm not excoriating different sets of users who are in different cost categories. My point is that those users and their system requirements and their business needs are different, and that's why they make different decisions. Let's see. How much will the RTX? Yeah, so Rachie mentions how much will the RTX 6057 gigabyte cost, $700. And again, Rachie, I would say, look, I understand that that's a criteria for some people. For me personally, I seriously do not care, right? I don't care how it compares to a console. I will care how it compares to other GPUs. I will care how that price compares to my long-term recapitalization, right, spending profile. But this notion of like the GPU costs $1,000 and the console costs $750, like I could care less, because the point is that the console can't do the thing that the PC does. We have different consumers who have different needs. You don't like Helix, but are you interested in Xbox mode for PC? So, and again, when I let's make sure we keep it straight. I'm not saying that I don't like Helix. I think Helix is a neat device. I think it's going to provide another. Despite the fact that I think we're maneuvering potentially off of it being a TI-99 Commodore 64 VIC-20, it's still a very viable device. And even when I was against, say, the acquisition of Activision, what I said was, as a person who studies the industry and watches the evolution, it was still interesting. First of all, I predicted that the acquisition would go through. And I said, as somebody who follows the news, I'm not interested, it's not fun to follow a hobby where things stay the same all the time. So I feel the same way about Project Helix. It's exciting to me that Microsoft/Xbox, having not found the success that they wanted going head to head with PlayStation as much, is trying to flip the script and provide a different device with different capability, with a different value prop that's going to have a different voice track that goes along with it. That to me is exciting. It was exciting back in the 90s when we had 6, 7, 8 different consoles, when we had 3DO, TurboGrafx, Philips CDI, the Atari Jaguar. Like, that was an exciting time. The market eventually decided that they weren't going to support it, and that's economics, right? And that's the market, and that's Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations kind of stuff. So that I acknowledge, but as a fan, right, it is exciting that we're getting something different. And no, I'm not interested in Xbox mode on PC. I've grown up on PC. I'm not interested in modes that kind of take over my normal desktop environment. I don't have a problem with Windows in terms of functionality. I have a problem with what Microsoft has done with Windows 11 in the terms of the way that it nags and bugs the hell out of you all the time. I have a problem with the fact that I have a PC that I've been running for 5 years that I installed Windows 11 on, and despite the fact that I've answered this same set of 3 questions, like it's Rick Grimes vetting me to see if I can join the survivors, it's still every 3 or 4 updates pops up this dialogue before it lets me get to the desktop. Do you want to use Edge as your default browser? Do you want to change your Edge settings to our recommended settings? I'm like, dude, look at the telemetry on my box. Do I use Edge? Why are you bothering me with this question? You should enable BitLocker. You should enable OneDrive as your backup. That's the problem that I have, and that's the problem that I think Windows is facing in terms of where people are getting sick of it on the market. So no, I'm not interested in a mode that does a takeover of my normal computing environment to put Xbox mode in front of me, because I don't simply use my PCs for gaming, and I'm an adult. I also, in the Xbox app, I don't have, like, I have those toggles where it can ingest your library manifest and index for like Steam and Epic. I have those flipped off because I'm an adult. If I want to play my Steam games, I can launch my Steam application. If I want to play my Epic games, I can launch my Epic app. I don't need Microsoft's help. And this has been I'm old enough that this has been a long-standing problem that I have. You talk to, older people, and they will tell you, like, anytime Microsoft is attempting to help you or tell you how you should do your software, it's generally like not something that we care for. Game Logic is a target market for PCMR, but he lacks the loud arrogance. Thanks a lot, Hero. Hero down there, if Helix is subsidized and didn't link to other storefronts, and if they had complete exclusives, it would have been a home run success. At a higher cost, Hero, I don't know. Well, I see what you're saying. If it's subsidized, yeah, absolutely. If it was toe-to-toe, price-to-price with the PlayStation 6, it would absolutely offer an incredible value prop. I just don't know, if that's a world we'll ever get to. Without those variables, it's not likely to succeed. I mean, mass market success. And yeah, I mean, I never predicted that this thing was going to be mass market. My prediction has been along the lines of 9 million units. That tracks along with what I understand to be Microsoft internal projections. But at a limited amount of PC functionality, I don't even know that I'm thinking 9 million. I think this thing, if it's console first, PC second, I think this thing is going to sell Steam Deck numbers. So now I'm thinking like 5 or 6 million. But we'll have to see. But at any rate, I just want to go back to what I was saying about the tech. I mean, so this thing is going to launch with RDNA 5. It's going to launch with Zen 6. It's going to have those features and capabilities. When you look at, let's see if I can get to, yeah. So I don't know if you can see this, but like if you look at the AMD roadmap, it shows industry first 2 nanometer on the CPU side. It shows Zen 6 and Zen 6 Chuck, which is what Magnus is. It shows that stuff becoming available in 2026. And it shows Zen 7 is the next thing that follows that. So after Magnus comes out, there's going to be Zen 7 processors. When you look at RDNA, the 9000 series are RDNA 4. This thing is going to launch with RDNA 5, and in the course of the 7 years of the generation, it's going to be superseded. So, the notion that, I mean, what I will say, here's my belief. The notion that Magnus/Helix will launch, and it will be like the best CPU, GPU / it'll be the best APU thing you can get. It may be the best kind of APU-like device you can buy. And it will definitely be the best device you could buy like that at cost. And yes, yea, verily, you can't walk into a store and configure it. In my mind, there's no way in the world it will be the most powerful PC you can build, even before you blow the lights out on a PC config. If you buy a discrete CPU and a discrete GPU, you will absolutely be able to do better. Now, if you're wrapped around the axle that this thing is specifically designed for Xbox, then sure, that's a thing. But again, that's 40 million people on the market. So, I don't know that applies to the general consumer. And again, I don't know. The only value prop to me for that would be if I cared about backwards compatibility of Xbox games. If I just care about moving forward, again, this box is going to have access to DLSS. We're going to talk a little bit about DLSS5 tonight. It's in my mind, and this is entirely just a PC centric view. In my mind, I can already see this thing being left behind. So great value prop for people who are tightly woven into the Xbox ecosystem, and absolutely the right fit for them. If you're a systems engineer, if you're a cloud engineer, you get beat over the head and talked about how it's not about selling customers the best thing. It's about selling them the thing that is the right fit for their needs. And there's absolutely 40 million customers out there who this thing is the right fit for their needs. No question, bar none. It's just not the majority of the market, and so, you know, we'll get to see how it plays out in terms of, you know, who it is a fit for, and who goes for it. Sorry, so some comments for the chat. Most of us are Hero Down Under. Most of it are comfortable with it just works. Hero Down Under says, I'm an Apple user. Retro says, boo Android for life. Rachel says, if you subsidize, paid online is guaranteed. Yeah, I don't know what they're gonna. I mean, again, this is a thing where, like, my own thoughts of it kind of tilt, right? Because if this is a console first device, then that mentality says on console, I'm accustomed and customers are conditioned to pay for online multiplayer when it's a paid game, right? Obviously, you get free online multiplayer for free to play, but you know that makes me, when I talked about this being a PC first, I was definitely down the path of they were going to have to do something about the paid multiplayer. I could see the Game Pass tiers collapsing. Now that it's a console first device and it's a true bona fide successor, console successor, COTS gaming appliance successor to the Series X, now I don't know that, you know, those tiers will collapse or that anything will be done about free to play multiplayer. It's sell to the hardcore Xbox fans. What's that number? Like I said, I mean 40 million, like by you know, by my rubric, in terms of people who are on Series X and Series S now. All of them are not hardcore fans. Like, some of them are there because of cost and low cost of access. You know, I bought Series S and I just do Game Pass. Are they going to carry forward into the next generation? I don't know. You know, so some subset in my mind of that 40 million. Rachie says, the problem I have with PC gaming is the last 5 years performance per dollar is horrible. The upgrade performance 30%. Congratulations, the prices also rise 30%. Also, you need a 30% bigger PSU. Yeah, I mean, Rachel, you're not wrong. Like, I had to do a complete stop, pop, and lock, and basically go around the lab and basically make sure that I bought PSU upgrades for every single one of my PCs, because I knew that they weren't going to make it into the further on generations of GPUs. And yeah, if you are... Real Nate says, just Microsoft said they are done subsidizing, which makes sense. Microsoft wants their money back. Yeah, if you are, so let's talk a little bit about, again, some generational differences. In the recent years, and I don't agree with it. So two things have happened in the PC space when we talk about GPUs in recent years. Number one, there's been this thing of this notion that maybe it's three things. Number one is this notion that for every, I'm trying to think how I normally say this, for every, that the cost rise is supposed to be commensurate with the performance rise. So if you're giving me a 10% increase in performance, the price should only go up by 10. The price differential should be 10%. So in the 30 years I've been building PCs, that was never the case. I really don't know where this notion has come up, and I definitely think it's been a thing pushed by tech tubers, because in past years that was never the case. There's also this notion that whatever the performance lift was from, let's just make up some numbers, right? So from Gen 5 to Gen 6. I'll use the RTX series, right? The GTX RTX series. So as we went from GTX 900 to 1000 to RTX 2, 3, 4, and 5, the notion that was, you know, hey, if the performance lift from GTX 1000 to RTX 2000 was 30%, then it should be 30% for RTX 2 to 3. And that should be consistent. Again, in my experience in the 30 years, it was never like that. It always wavered every generation. There's always been like a tick-tock. It's been fairly recently, in my mind, that NVIDIA has settled into this notion of, hey, we're gonna give you the next generation architecture, then we're gonna give you a mid-gen refresh, and we're gonna introduce the Supers and the TIs, then we're gonna go to the next generation. So that paradigm has only really been in place, in my mind, for 9-10 years. So this notion that the performance increases were consistent across the generations, to me, that was never the case. And then the third thing that has occurred over the last few years is tech tubers talk about, it doesn't make, the RTX 5000 is bad because it doesn't provide enough lift for a person going from an RTX 4000. Like this is the thing that I find really frustrating. I'm like, who on an RTX 4000 needs to upgrade? No one who on an RTX 4 needs to upgrade to an RTX 5. People on an RTX 4000 need to wait until the RTX 6000 comes out. That's literally always been the case. And if you were cycling GPUs faster than that, then you were like me and you were some kind of weird masochist enthusiast, right? But that's completely unnecessary. And before I went into the space of like wanting multiple rigs so that I could test different configurations and so that I could write, and that's all content creation. That's all like podcasting. That's like the normal average consumer. If they buy an RTX 2000, they do not need to upgrade to RTX 4000. And so I don't understand the dialogue around, hey, 5000 is bad because there's not enough daylight between it and the 4000. And this is a thing that tech tubers and the media and everybody pushes for everything. It doesn't make any sense to upgrade to the iPhone 17 because there's not enough difference between, no, nobody who on the iPhone 16 needs to upgrade to the iPhone 17. You guys should be talking about the deltas between the iPhone 15 and the iPhone 17 because that's the practical use case that consumers are going to go through. So, sorry, I know that's a bit of a rant. So let's talk a little bit about Resident Evil Requiem. I'm going to take a sip of coffee and check the chat too. Let's see. Hero Dinner says like you and a tech psychos. Me, I'm just a console gaming psycho. It's about affordability. Yeah, Hero, and that's my rant is that like from an affordability perspective, like nobody needs to be talking about cycling GPUs, right? Like every generation, that just doesn't make practical sense to me. Okay, we're gonna try and push the pace because I said this wasn't gonna be as long as some of my other. Definitely, the objective is not to be as long as Gaming Outside the Algorithm. This news story over on IGN by Vicky Blake. Resident Evil Requiem, now the series' fastest selling game ever as it passes new sales milestone. Resident Evil Requiem has now sold 6 million copies. Jeez, I thought it was just like 5 million earlier today. Making it the fastest selling installment of the horror game since it all kicked off in Raccoon City 30 years ago. We already knew that the latest mainline Resident Evil game had sold 5 billion copies within 5 days. Okay, that's what I saw. Causing some stock issues for physical copies. And now, just a few days after that announcement, publisher Capcom has added another million to the tally. I mean, so I think this is great. I certainly don't have anything to complain about. And Resident Evil games, 7 and Village have performed. I think the thing that's most remarkable about this is, so you go back definitely like I'd say 20 years ago. I'm trying to think. So I think before the Xbox 360 generation, when we still had boxed, shrink-wrapped PC games on store shelves, I think you had this cyclical thing in gaming where it wasn't just big holiday release. Like you would get a little salt, you get a little salt and pepper in the lead up to spring break. You would get some other great things in the lead up to Memorial Day. You would get something dropping over the summer because kids were getting out of school and you'd want to seed the market with stuff for kids to play. You get another big bushel of stuff, with Madden and the technical, formal start of the commercial retail holiday season in the August timeframe as people were going back to school. And then you had college kids taking off, so you'd want to stock the supply chain with titles for that. You get another set of stuff around like Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, and of course I'm using U.S. holidays. I assume that the release cadence also supported other cultures in their holidays. And then obviously you get the big holiday releases right throughout. So my point is you had much more of an equitable spread across the calendar year in terms of releases. Then I feel like, and I may not be right because I'm not looking at my history book right now, I feel like in the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 generation, that's where we really became oriented around, like, no good games came out to the holiday season. The first few years of the 360, that wasn't the case because I think Xbox Live drove this release cadence that was oriented around the migratory nature of multiplayer, first really thriving on PC. And I know we had multiplayer thriving on console. I know we had multiplayer before, but it really exploded and took off with the Xbox 360 and Xbox Live. And yes, I know Xbox Live was there before. I feel like the contingent that was on there was fairly small. It wasn't mainstream. The 360 era is the first time that, in my mind, people got a console and kind of autonomously signed up to the live, like, multiplayer regime. And I mean, at least for me and my memories and my nostalgia, that characterized like my entirety of my time on the Xbox 360. And it carried with it this prevalence of multiplayer being included in every title. And it, like I said, it fed into the migratory nature. I remember running with my crew on 360. It was, because I wasn't into trading games as much as a lot of my friends were. But I would buy a game. I would try to get through the single player campaign, but everybody wanted to get online and play multiplayer, so I often wouldn't get time to finish the single player. And then, like, as I was getting back to the single player campaign, I would say, "Hey, you want to jump on Gears?" And people would be like, "Oh no, dude, we've moved on. Like we're getting Rainbow Six, right?" Or I'm just making up titles. I don't know if those released in the same year or close proximity. But my point was, people were very quick to move, and your whole crew tended to move. And if you didn't move with them, then you were kind of like, you didn't follow. We were definitely part of a herd mentality. But I feel like shortly after that, as we got deeper into that generation, is where we really started to grind down on this notion of, like, really big games only came along during the holiday season. And I feel like we kind of stagnated. And then I feel like a few years ago, that started to loosen back up. In particular, when we started hitting this notion that if games missed holiday, they were kind of automatically being seeded into Q1 of the following calendar year. And we had these years of Horizon Forbidden West and Resident Evil Village, not Village, the Resident Evil 7 and things like that being really big hits right in that February-March timeframe. I think this timeframe has worked out good for Capcom. Their fiscal year, I think, ends this month, I think. So, this has worked out really well for them. This is the same timeline that they put out Dragon's Dogma 2, which I'm thoroughly convinced they pushed that game out the door a little hot to make sure that they made earnings. But yeah, this is good. People really love Resident Evil. I think that's another thing this proves, is that it's really a series that has really cemented itself and kind of enjoys a little more widespread, especially since it's moved and migrated in design out of the tank control time frame, a Resident Evil 2 and 3, and has become, its designed aspects has broadened, even though they're still fairly short games. And it's also super interesting that that's a creative choice that Capcom has made, that even though their gameplay styles and mechanics and things have broadened a little bit, they still keep the scope to, a 7, 8, 10 hour, 15 hour type of game. So it's been really interesting to see. Hero Down mentions, again, going back to the last conversation, if you can't afford it, then it's not for you. Simple. I'm still an iPhone 13 Pro, but I'll buy a Samsung OLED every 3 years. Rage, he says, I do see someone using Helix for games and with the money saved to get a new laptop. Yeah, that's an interesting combination. I've seen other people mention the laptop discussion point. It's weird because in my mind, I personally have unquestionably, handhelds are the replacements for laptops. Again, being somebody who used to be high travel and still now travels occasionally, less so for business, more so, for family stuff. I'm not getting on a plane with a laptop. I'm not lugging a laptop in a big power supply, even though I know they've become thinner than when I used to carry them around. But to me, it makes much more sense to me to pack a Steam Deck or the Switch 2 or the PlayStation Portal, and in particular, right, in that combination, a Steam Deck. In fact, the way I travel, I could easily carry 2 handhelds and have access to 2 different sets of the library. So, really, it says, speaking on affordability, here you were already on the edge with the Pro, so I don't know how you were going to feel about a $1,000 plus console. And here down under says, that's why I'm a console game psycho. I know regardless, I will buy the PlayStation 6 day one because I value consoles and just like collecting PlayStation. No need to deny my habit anymore. All right, very cool. So we're going to move on to the next topic. I think I'm going to try and cover this one pretty quickly too. Not going to get as deep into it as I thought about it. So a quick, this goes to a conversation that I had earlier today on Twitter. But this notion of, I don't know if I can find it. Hopefully I won't bring up anything not safe for work here as I'm scrolling Twitter. Leaks. So I know it's a big deal. And I want to talk about this a little bit because I think my perspective on this is like significantly different than a lot of people in the gaming conversation on Twitter. I don't care about leaks. They make no difference to me. I don't get it. I'll just go ahead and read my tweet here. I don't have any regard for gaming leaks. It's not like I earmark money or do a budget set aside based on a leak, or set my gameplay calendar months in advance based on a leak, or take a day off of work because somebody said there's going to be a direct next week. These things are interesting anecdotes. Most of you guys just use them to weaponize the platform wars and gouge someone's eyes out from another tribe, fodder for grousing and griefing in the ongoing Twitter war nonsense. The grubby Coliseum bleacher dwellers have made a business for leakers and sites that proclaim to have sources. What I do respect is someone who conveys inside info they heard, but admits when that info was wrong or off by timeline, whether or not they were off by days, weeks, months, or whatever. That's more than the non-leaker YouTubers who constantly make predictions, get one thing right out of 100, and yet say, I called it, or call themselves Mr. 90% right all the time. So my point of this is just to expand on a little bit. A couple years ago, we had a thing where, and again, I'm not super familiar with all the lingo, but this personality who's called the Snitch, I think, was kind of outed and doxxed, or we found out his identity or whatever. And people made a very big deal about like the content he put out. And I'm like, you guys made the market for it. You guys are the ones who click it and retweet it and turn cartwheels and somersaults and backflips over a leak. And I'm like, again, like I said, I don't get it. If somebody says, hey, this is great, for instance, rumors that NVIDIA is bringing back the RTX 3060, or rumors that NVIDIA isn't putting out GPUs this year. Okay. Like, I don't care about the leak. Like, the fact that NVIDIA hasn't made an announcement of a 5000 series next gen update, or RTX 6000 GPUs tells me what I need to know. My PCs I have a schedule, I have a cadence when they get upgraded or updated. And when I'm approaching that, I have a number of months and I back off of that and I start looking around. And if I start looking around and there's nothing to upgrade them with, then I say, I guess I won't do the upgrade then. Like, it's really that simple. The notion that like these things are like the PlayStation 5 Pro, like leaked. I'm like, okay, like, but I'm not taking $750 and stuffing it in my mattress so I can buy a PlayStation 5 Pro. Like, when they officially announce it and put a release date on it, then I'll have a sense for when it's coming out, and then I'll do something about money then. Like, I quite honestly don't understand this rabid fervor with leaks. But more importantly, and guys are here from the Discord that I hang out in. Thank you guys very much for letting me hang out without, poking me in my eyes all the time about things you guys don't agree with. I'm not saying this to criticize like the conversation that's going on, but a few weeks ago we found this. I don't know whether it was NeoGAF or Reset Era, that there's a group out there that ranks people by leaks, that like keeps stats on them to like when people are wrong, and I'm like, that's not something that I'm going to spend my time on. I'll admit, when I hear on like Kind of Funny Games Daily or something that Nate the Hate has said something that I'm like, okay, yeah, there's probably a Nintendo Direct next week, but like, what am I going to do about it? Again, I'm not going to do anything about it until it's officially announced. When these leaks come by, I go, that's an interesting data point. I'll keep it in mind. I put a pin in my corkboard on it, but I don't make decisions off of it. And that's a big thing. That to me is the difference. Like, there's things to listen to, and then there's things to make decisions about. And I don't make decisions about a thing until it's official. Because why would you? How would you? I don't know how it would make sense. But I think, like I said, this notion of the leak and then the leakers, that we socially grade them and that we consider them of worth or value. And I'll just be clear. This is about a conversation that somebody came into that I was having with Detective Seeds, and like, it was I say uninvited. Of course, Twitter's a public space. Anybody can comment on whatever they want to. But like, I mentioned something to Seeds, and this person comes by giving me, their own personal assessment of like Seeds' value, and I'm like, Seeds and I are friends. Like, we don't agree on everything, but like first of all, he served his country. I have the utmost of respect for him. We have a common background, so I have the utmost of respect for him for that. Like, Detective Seeds is not, I don't know him as a leaker. Like, he's Detective Seeds. So I have a relationship with him, and that relationship is not built on, what he says, what he obtained from insider information. I also personally think, for Detective Seeds, to me, just my personal perception, and this, maybe it's biased because we talk about other stuff. Seeds to me is not Tom Henderson in Insider Gaming. He's not Jason Schreier. He's not Rebecca Valentine, right? He's got buddies who work at PlayStation, and he mentions things that he heard. And I'm like, so when he says it, I'm like, okay, he heard that from somebody. And that's what I assess it as, and then I just move on with my life. What I'm going to say very pointedly, and I know I say a lot of things people don't say, but I'm going to say it again. Like, if you allow yourself to be hung by your toes about leaks and leaks that you believe, and you allowed yourself to get pissed off and aggravated and not be happy because a leak that you believed didn't come true, that's your own damn fault. I blame your parents for not raising you right. Like, pay attention to the stuff that you think will actually make you happy. Buying into, just quite frankly, like, any leak to me ranks up as, and I'm not saying people who do leaks aren't working hard. They're working hard. But at the end of the day, a leak to me is just like when I walk by in the grocery, go into the grocery cashier and see the Inquirer, the New York Post, right on the sidelines. Like, do I think that maybe they actually did find aliens out in the desert? Maybe. Am I making decisions based off that? No. Am I buying the paper? No. I'm checking out with my flipping groceries and going on about my life. So you guys who like to live the leak lifestyle, it's your own, in my opinion, it's your own fault when you're disappointed. And if you want to play these games and rank people and decide like their value based on how accurate they are on leaks, that's just kind of a weird way to determine the value of a human being. And just, again, another part of kind of like everything that's wrong with the gaming conversation. But that's just me. I need to pull up another tab, but I need to kill this browser window really quick. Yep. So I want to talk a little bit about DLSS. And I'm going to check the chat and grab some coffee. Here another mentions, I'm just an enthusiast. If I could afford the spend, I'd buy a new Apple device. The same was like, here, don't paint me with that brush. I don't buy a new Apple device. Look, they just made announcements in March. I did not buy a new Apple device. I was thirsty, yes, but I didn't do it. I'm waiting for the Mac Studio update, which I'm hoping and believing will approach. We'll get at WWDC. I won't say that it hasn't been a struggle, because I've been trying to convince myself to go ahead and buy one now, and then when the new one comes out, just trade that one in and upgrade, because the Apple trade-in program is incredible. Rachel says, I thought you didn't like PC just for gaming. Steam Deck is that. Yeah. Again, yeah. I mean, Heroes Down Under said it. The Steam Deck is a COTS gaming appliance. It offers additional functionality. That's great, but it's not easily accessible for upgrading. I know you can do some MacGyver type stuff to put a bigger SSD in there. I'm not doing all that, but I bought it as a locked configuration gaming device. So, you know, at $650, you know, it was in the price envelope for me to do that. I could do other stuff. I played around with it a little bit when I got it, you know, flipping into Linux desktop mode, but in general, I just use it for gaming. Okay. I don't like this news story. I'm going to talk mostly about the conversation that's going on about DLSS5. I don't like this headline. I don't like, you know, but I just grabbed the first news article that I could find. NVIDIA, that came up in search. NVIDIA's new graphics tech is impressive until you see what it does to faces. This news story over at Polygon by Patricia Hernandez. NVIDIA's RTX 50 series will be able to upgrade graphics on games like Resident Evil Requiem and Starfield. What innovations should a new generation of video games bring with it? Bigger worlds, faster load times. GPU maker NVIDIA has an answer that I bet you've never thought of. What if you paid thousands of dollars for a computer graphics chip that makes it seem like you've put a Snapchat beauty filter over everything? Yeah, I really don't like this article. Like, it is... Jesus. This is what I talk about the games media being trash. At NVIDIA GTC Live 2026 on Monday, the AI-focused company unveiled DLSS5, which NVIDIA claims is the most significant breakthrough in computer graphics since the debut of real-time ray tracing in 2018. Reactions to that tech have been mixed. So I'm not going to read all this stuff because this person just has a broken perspective on what's going on. So let's talk about upscaling technology just in general, really quickly. Upscaling technology is where they take an image at an internal resolution. Let's call it 1620p, right? And they say, hey, we want to upscale this to 4K, right, to 2160p. And so what the algorithm does is it looks at the image that it has and it tries to fill in the rest of the image to upscale it to 4K. And so it's doing a combination of machine learning and AI to get to that. And then there's other things that like are kind of incorporated in these NVIDIA technologies, and right, which I think everybody just kind of lumps into the notion of upscaling, which that's fine. It's not necessary to parse it at that granular a level. You know, when we talk about multi-frame generation and low latency computation and all those types of things. But generally it takes a lower internal resolution image and tries to make it better, right? Using predictive technologies and using, I'll just call it its best guess, right? Based on what the compute that the GPU has available. DLSS5, I don't think it's worth it to really get into what it really does. It's real-time neural rendering model that infuses pixels with photoreal lighting and materials. It really seems to me it's a tuning of the algorithm to hyper focus on lighting. You know, it says lighting and materials, but I think mostly what I've seen is lighting. And I haven't had a chance to read a tech explainer about it. I don't know if I need to go that deep into it. And that kind of brings me to my evaluation of it. What's the big deal? It makes our games look and play better. It should, at the end of the day, give us better image quality. I think I saw some things in here packed in here about also increases in multi-frame generation and more choice. All of those things are good. And what I'll say as an NVIDIA GPU main is I have yet to, and some of this may be revisionist history, but I don't think any iteration of DLSS has come along that has unilaterally, for an extended period of time, made my video games worse. Yes, maybe there's a DLSS version that comes out that isn't great at initial launch, and then they work at it just like a game. for a couple of months, and then voila, they get it performing the way that they want to. There's a lot being made out on Twitter right now about, well, it took them to RTX 5090s. I'm like, yeah, because it's a tech demo. But they're not gonna release this technology with the requirement that you need two RTX 5090s to pull it off. They're gonna release it in a way that makes it commercially viable. So my feeling about it is this is an update that may hopefully come in the fall, that will make my RTX 5000s and RTX 4000s worth more, return higher ROI for what I paid for them. It's just like kind of when you bought the 360, and one of the things I always say about the Xbox 360 was it was a fundamentally different device at the end of the 7 years than it was 8 years than it was when we first bought it. They just kept adding stuff in via software, making it a more functional device. And I felt like the experience of living with that device was really one where its functionality and its overall value increased over time. That's the same thing here about a GPU. You're getting, greater value, greater technology, better methodologies to make your games hum and sing over time. And that's, to me, is great. Like, there's nothing to complain about. There's some people about, so first of all, there's some people who are acting like AI ML hasn't been the whole point of these upscaling technologies over time. Again, the way you get to upscaling is the computer guesses and predicts how, what additional pixels it needs to add to get to the higher resolution image. So AI ML has been the order of the day since the very beginning. It's not new. The notion that we're getting DLSS5 on these cards, and I think these cards, Nate, you might know, I think these cards, the RTX 5000 cards, launched with DLSS4. So again, we launched with DLSS4. We've gotten DLSS 4.5. We've gotten a new transformer model along with it. And now we're getting DLSS5. Those are significant upgrades that have occurred along the total life cycle ownership of these cards that, again, return value. There are a lot of people grousing about this. And again, let's remember, RTX or DLSS 4.5 causes a significant performance hit on RTX 2000 and 3000 series cards. Look, I'm not saying these things to be insulting. If you're on an RTX 2000 series card, you're part of the PC potato nation, right, that I mentioned. Like, and again, I'm just identifying that you guys are in a different buying profile. You guys are in a buying profile where you get tech, and as long as it does, in my mind, what I would define as the bare minimum that you need it to do, then you will stay on it, right? You will stay on an RTX 2000 series, and you will play Fallout or Oblivion with 99 mods, and you'll keep like mixing and matching those mods and playing that game over and over and over again, right? And we have the data that shows us that people, we have the hardware survey, we have the fact that people buy old games on Steam, yada yada yada. But if you are a PC gamer in the 14% and you are playing new release games, modern games, these tech deliveries increase your value for the price that you paid for the GPUs. These GPUs are not cheap. Was image quality perfect today? No, right? It's a tech demo. It's going to improve over time. The same thing I say about games. We often flip out about how games look the first time that they're shown. We either overly praise them or we slag them and drag them. But what matters is when it's delivered, and that's the same thing here for DLSS5. Great, they announced it. That tells me that something is hopefully theoretically coming out in fall. I am also very much prepared for we're not going to get it this fall. We're going to get Q1 of 2027. Like that's the reality. So am I sitting here crying in my milk if I don't get DLSS5 in the fall? No. But I also readily expect that what we get in the fall is going to be significantly different and improved from what we saw today, because that is the nature of technology and software development. The point of them announcing it today was to let you know that you're going to be getting a thing down the line. I'm also very curious if this means that there's something different going on with GPUs at NVIDIA than what we've heard by rumor. Because it would kind of make sense to me that if you were doing DLSS5, DLSS5 could be one of two things. Either it could be, hey, we're not putting out GPUs, we're not doing a mid-gen refresh, and so we're giving people DLSS5 as a compensating gift and reward, particularly because we want to retain customers, to follow us into the next generation. Or it could be, this is what I would normally expect, or it could be we are going to do a super series mid-gen refresh, and we're going to put those things out along with DLSS5. And in this day and age, that maybe that's just one SKU, but I think that would still be significant, right, in terms of making something else available on the market. So we will just see how it goes. Oh yeah, I'm planning for the Mac Mini upgrade. I'm with you in a leak. Cool. When it's officially announced, cool. It's the main reason why I just laugh at these people claiming concrete. Real Nate. And I'm with you about your comment earlier. I don't need Microsoft's help launching my games. I don't want them touching my games. I already don't use Steam Big Picture. Yeah, I've never used Steam Big Picture. Like I've only used it like as an experiment to see what it looks like. And then I contemplated using it as my like norm for about 30 seconds, and then I just went back to like regular Steam. This new DLSS is remixing tech. It's basically Sora AI for gaming. I don't like it. All right, Hero Down Under is dropping out. Real Nate says, yeah, it was an odd thing for them to show this early. Digital Foundry stated the demo was ran using dual 5090s, and I felt like that meme. Why would you show it to me if I couldn't have it then? Yeah, we've gotten a couple of updates. I double-checked. Yeah, DLSS4 when the RTX 4000 was released. Yep. So I think there's only one other thing that I wanted to go over tonight. And that's Crimson Desert. And it's tough for me to tell. Look, I haven't been the Crimson Desert hater that lots of other people have been. I don't think it's... it's not necessarily one of my pastimes of, that I find interested in, dragging a game or making things difficult. Look, if these guys are going to crash and burn because they're trying to hide something about the base console games and their quality, then that will happen when the game, as I always say, when it releases. I can't imagine how this thing is going to run on the Series S, even though they put out specs and performance expectations for that. But that will be interesting. But here's the thing that to me really, like, for all the things that we've made issues about, this is the first thing that really says to me, oh, it looks like these guys are trying to pull a Leon Lett and fumble it, on the 5-yard line. This new story over on Eurogamer: Crimson Desert makes last-minute change to Steam release with the addition of infamous de novo DRM. Like I said, over at Eurogamer by Fran Ruiz. Earlier today, we shared the news that Doom: The Dark Ages de novo DRM protection has been cracked. Now, only 3 days before launch, we've just learned upcoming AAA behemoth Crimson Desert will have that layer of protection on PC. The Gamer pointed out the update to the game's Steam page, which according to SteamDB was altered to add the de novo box on 12 March. Now, with only 3 days to go before it releases, the news is spreading, and there's a ripple of discontent amongst players excited for the game across various social media platforms. Though this might seem like a major misstep to veteran PC players who are well aware of de novo-related performance woes in the past, Crimson Desert crossed 3 million wish lists earlier this month and is riding a lot of hype out there. Regardless of where reviews end up landing, it seems that Pearl Abyss already has a likely hit on its hands. That's possible, but here's the big problem that I have. Everything that we've seen to date is that this game looks gorgeous, but on PC in particular, this notion that it's performant. Now we have de novo, our DRM in the mix, and now I don't know that it's performant anymore. Now, when I say that, what's my normal means of addressing that? First of all, I let the game hit and I check Steam user community reviews to see if there's some big performance problem with it, because the Steam community will let you know. And then if there's not, I will, sometimes I'll still buy the game. And then I will do my own performance testing, and I will look at frame rate pacing, and I'll post those results, and I'll post screenshots and clips and all that sorts of stuff. So I haven't determined if this is a game that I'm going to onboard with, but I definitely have concerns. I know de novo has tried the smoke and mirrors thing that, saying, no, it's just an urban myth. We're really not, having de novo DRM doesn't actually yield performance decreases. Maybe it's just because I've been around a while and I'm fine believing in the urban myths that I believe in. I do believe de novo causes a hit in performance. I don't trust it. I don't like it. it's always felt like shady, scumduggery, since they've been around. I don't believe that, they've improved themselves or become first-class citizens or become no, I'll wait for the game to hit. I will see if they have it. I have not. Denuvo has a threshold with me. It used to be I would never buy a game that had Denuvo. Now I've seen it incorporated in what I think are good games, and I've seen it in particular incorporated in games of publishers and studios that, in my opinion, need the support, need the help, because they weren't like AAA studios backed by a major studio, a major publisher. So some of those I've bypassed the Denuvo concern. Quite honestly, my concern is a little mollified because I know that the norm is that they put Denuvo DRM in, and then about a year later, almost all of them strip it out. So, that's a plus. This does seem like making your best effort to fumble, though, as you're coming in on the finish line, because I'm like, if you were going to put it in there, probably better for you to have gotten out in front, for you to be sticking in at the last minute. Now, what I don't know is I don't know that Denuvo DRM was running in all the testing that we've seen, in particular, is what makes me very concerned. So I just don't know how well this thing is going to perform when it lands. And like I said, I'll probably hold back and see how the Steam community gets on with it here at first. Real Nate says, I just find it odd that a lot of people who don't pre-order early are ordering Crimson Desert, and me the one who will order months in advance when I'm sure I'm waiting for reviews. Yeah. Retro says they released a statement saying all preview builds on PC had it on already. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I hadn't seen that, so thanks very much, Retro, for adding that. Real Nate says, at Retro, we know the real reason they was mad. And Retro says, I'm waiting also. Yeah, I mean, yeah, in general, like, my personal feeling is like I'm just not as much as I play games, as much as I buy games, as long as I've been gaming. And I've never been one who's been as much subject to the FOMO of pre-ordering or getting excited about trailers or announcements. I've covered that a lot in previous podcasts, but I will say, for franchises that I have long been a player of, and for studios that I've been a big fan of, right, that I trust, like a Codemasters game or a Turn 10 game, have very frequently pre-ordered those. Massive Entertainment, I've very frequently pre-ordered those. But in this day and age, in general, outside of that, like, I'm just not pre-ordering. I'm going to wait to see if something sticks to the landing. So, thanks so much tonight, everybody, for joining in the chat. I really appreciate you guys. Real and Nate, Rachy, Hero Down Under, Retro, anybody else who happened to join by the chat. If I didn't call your name, I do apologize. RPG88, sorry. I didn't realize you were in the chat too. So thanks a lot for swinging by. My attempt is going to be to do these once a week. And again, I'm going to kind of soften, admittedly, my effort to make it, super newsworthy and not talk about, some of the hypocritical takes that I think I see out there. Like I said, I can no longer assert that I'm trying to be outside the algorithm. We will definitely be inside the algorithm. I will try and keep that to a minimum, or at least, not the entirety of the content, just to some. But yeah, I'm back to trying to do this once a week, so we will just see how it goes. Until next time, take care of yourself, stay safe out there, play the games that you like, come here to talk to me about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going weekly video games podcast and the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. That show premieres. That show goes live at 8 p.m. East Coast Daylight Savings Time. So that is, if I remember my time zones correctly, that is +4 Quebec. For people doing the translation from UTC. But for anybody who happens to swing by and watch the archive version of this live stream, please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can just receive a notification whenever I post new content. Hopefully I will see you guys once again next week. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for me. I'm out of here.